Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful back in the studio today, and I'm so excited to share this video with you. I don't know, but this might be my favorite project in this series. I don't know. It's hard to choose. So if you have been following along, maybe let me know in the comments after you watch this video if you have a favorite, and there's more to come. So I hope that you are following along, and I will include, as usual, a link to this entire playlist down in the description. So if you haven't been following along, you might want to go back and start at the beginning, because there's been lots of fun projects and one kind of leads to the other. So I've been sharing them in sort of in the order that I've been coming up with them, so you can kind of see how my brain's working. This is a video that I've needed to do for a long time. It's actually an updated video to one that I made, I don't know, a couple of years ago maybe. And it was a video on making professional looking buttons, and I needed to redo this video because the product that I used back then is no longer available. So when they still watch it a lot, and I keep leaving it up, and I'm going to leave it up because this video is going to be specifically on making buttons using gel prints. The other video, the previous video, had nothing to do with gel prints, and it was making buttons out of lots of different things. So I'll put a link for that video as well, because you might want to go back and watch that. I know this is about gel prints, but you might get some ideas about other materials and things that you might want to use that you hadn't thought of to make buttons. So I started making handmade buttons because I also knit. I make knitted neck warmers, and they are buttoned. And so I had the idea that in addition to the buttons that I purchased, that maybe I could make them really unique and a little more artistic by making my own buttons. So that's how that video came about. I have had lots of comments and questions over the years, and one of the things that I would be asked that I didn't even think of when I made the buttons was, are they washable? Because I was at the time, and I still do have them listed in my Etsy shop, and so I think people were wanting to use them for other kind of garments or things that you might want to wash. So I have adjusted how I do these. Those were washable, but I like to do a shank style button, which means there is a little loop on the back that's made out of metal, and that's where you sew it on. And I just prefer that style of button for my neck warmers. And also because if you're doing them like I'm going to be doing with artwork, then you don't want to kind of mess up the artwork with holes that you would use to sew on your buttons, because when you sew those on, now you're going to have a line with thread. So I prefer shank style buttons. You could make these and drill holes if you want to do that. They also actually make a resin mold with a button for buttons that has 4 holes. The only difficult thing about that is that we're using our gel prints, and getting the holes exactly lined up would be hard. And I'm not sure how they would be as far as being waterproof once you've drilled a hole in it. So I prefer the shank style buttons, and that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do today. So this actually took me just 2 days to do all of these buttons, maybe a day and a half. So I wanted to share the reasons why I like the new products that I'm using as opposed to the previous products. Now, the previous product was a 2-part resin that you had to mix, and it just cured in the air. You didn't need any special equipment. It just cured, but it took a long time, especially depending on how thick that you poured your resin. So that product is no longer available anyway, and so I had to switch to something. And so someone had mentioned along the way UV resin. Why didn't I use UV resin? It's a lot quicker. And I didn't have a curing light for that. You can do it just in the sunshine in a windowsill that has, sun coming in. It just takes a little bit longer. So I looked into it, and I love this product. So I'm going to be using a product called Picasso is the brand, UV resin, and it's formulated for artists. It's crystal clear. It's fast curing. You can use it with a UV LED light. It has a high gloss finish, but you can also, like I said, cure it out in the sun. So that's what I've been using. I've been using it for my jewelry and for my buttons, and it's been working out great. So I thought I would finally do this video and do it with gel prints, because I've been into the whole gel gel print thing, trying to find ways to use them in art. So if you haven't been following along with the series, like I said, there's lots of videos from the beginning. And so I'm going to be referencing some things that may have been covered in previous videos. So again, those will all be linked down below the playlist, and then you can just start from the beginning. And the episodes are all numbered, and there's a description in the title. You'll be able to tell what's going to happen in that video. So hopefully you can find the ones that I'm referring to if you want to go back and watch those. So the buttons that I made, it actually took me, when you purchase this, and I'll have a link down below for this along with all the other materials that I've been using in the series. But when you order this, it comes with 2 bottles of resin, 100 grams each. And it comes with, it has the cap on it, but then it comes with the little kind of pour cap that you use, so you don't have to, use it all up at one time. And that was one of the nice things, is it's already ready to go. You don't have to mix it. They do give you this little pouring cup, a little silicone pouring cup, and a couple of tools that are double-sided. So you have kind of a spoon tool, and then a flat one, and then this angled flat one, and then kind of a little pointy end. So you can use these. And I've used these for some of my things. The other thing that I like to use is just a cheap paintbrush. I get these by the pack in the children's section at like Walmart in their craft section. The nice thing about this resin versus the other resin is the other resin, if the 2-part one, it just hardens over time. Well, that means you have to throw away your brush, and I used to use like the little medicine measuring cups for my little cup. And so you would have to throw those things away. This one doesn't really do that. So it's gotten hard now because it's been sitting kind of in my light for a couple of days, but you can just peel things out of this cup. And if you clean this, I've been using the same brush for 2 days, so it doesn't get hard. So was another nice thing, is that you don't have to mix it and it stays liquid. So to clean these up though, I do use some alcohol, rubbing alcohol on a little cloth. Now, if you have those little prep pads, that's what I used to have with my jewelry, but I didn't have any here, so I was just using a paper towel and the alcohol. It doesn't clean up, get rid of the stickiness as well as the other type of resin, but it seems to be working okay. So that's what you're going to need as far as the resin tools. And then the other thing that I had purchased was this little UV curing light. And I'm going to kind of try to tip it up. This one is actually a 2-piece one. And I have I have a couple of other studios that I work out of. So I have some different ones, and none of them thrilled me for different reasons. And so I found this one. And I really like it because you can just put it over your work as individual pieces, or they magnetize together and you can have it, and then the lights are all the way around. The only thing is you don't have light from this direction or the back side. So you do have to rotate some things, and I'll show you that as we go. But I really do like this one. I'll have a link down below for that. It just has a little C port, and it has one in each side if you're using them separately. But it only comes with 1 power cord, and this is a C and a USB on the other side. So you just have to have the adapters. You can use them separately. Again, if you have another C port, a lot of people have this because it's just a real common one, for your phone kind of thing. So that's what I'm going to be using. And then it also comes with this little acrylic tray that's like your little shelf that goes in here. And so I use that. And then I think materials wise, then it's just some smaller things. Now, one thing that I also did was, I don't want to get resin on my acrylic tray that comes with it. So I've just been using some craft plastic, and you can see where you get drips and things every once in a while. So this way I can just toss these when they get too grungy, because I like to work with a clean one, especially when you get close to the end of the process. So these are just leftover scraps from my craft plastic that I used to make my stencils out of. And so I just have some of those. And then I have, let's see, I'll kind of go in with some of the other things kind of as I'm using them. But a couple of things that are handy is an emery board for sanding. I also use this little bead reamer because I don't have any files with me here, and so a little file or something, or a pokey tool, something to kind of use as a second hand work. So I've been using this. And then To cut out my shapes, I'm going to be making a substrate and then the artwork. So for this video, I'm going to start out with making the artwork and then we'll put it all together. So they're going to be buttons again. So you need to have something to cut out your shape. I'm just using these punches from Recollections. And for this, I used a 1-inch circle punch. This little heart one, which is almost an inch. And then this is also an inch. And then these are 1.5-inch circles, and then another next larger heart. So these punches again are all from Recollections, but any punches that you have, I like to use punches because I'm going to be making several layers and I want them to all be identical. You could also, if you don't have the punches, but maybe you have a cutting machine like a Cricut or something like that, you can cut out shapes that way. So something to punch shapes. And then to finish these, to make them also waterproof, is I'm using stainless steel wire for my shank because I want something that's not going to rust. The previous buttons that I did, like I said, I wasn't considering that they were going to be going through the washing machine or anything like that. And I don't remember what wire I used. It was probably something to do with my jewelry, which then would tarnish and might bleed onto your clothing or something like that. So I thought just to be safe, I would use stainless steel wire for this. This is 18 gauge and it was a little hard because it's stainless steel. It's a little firm and harder to cut. So I have some 20 gauge, which is the next gauge smaller, coming today. So that's why I don't have the shanks on all the rest of these, because I want to make some that are a little easier to bend. Okay, so that to make those two, you're going to also need just some kind of tool. I have some jewelry tools here, and so I need cutters to cut the wire and then something round that you can shape it. I think when I did the first ones, I didn't even have a tool like this, and I think I just wrapped them around a skewer or something like that. That could be around the end of your paintbrush. You just want it to have a circular shape that is big enough to fit a needle and thread through. Okay, so I'll show you all of these, I think maybe up close at the end, but I want to get to the fact that they're all individual little pieces of art. So no two are alike. And I love that. I think they're going to be so fun for lots of projects, for journal projects, to have as closures on books, if you make tote bags, they would be a pretty closure. I can use them on my neck warmers and that kind of thing. So even though they're all different, you can make them cohesive by cutting them out of the same piece of paper. And so I'm going to show you what I made, because you're going to have to make the paper that you need. And all of these, this whole bit here, these were all made from one piece of paper. So they all can kind of go together because there's going to be some color from one in another one, mixing them around. This set here are from the stripy papers that we made at the beginning of the series that we've been using for all these projects. So I wanted to show you that the papers that were made before, the stripy papers, those also work. It's just that the pattern of them is larger scale than these. These are more detailed in a finer, smaller scale. These that I did go ahead and put the shanks on are, I do lots of like vintage journals and that kind of thing too. So I just wanted to show you that you don't have to do the gel prints if you don't want. You can use anything. These are also done with paper and they are waterproof. So I actually had a jar of water around here. Maybe I'll pop them in there later and just show you. But I left these soaking in water just to show that they are waterproof. Okay, so these, if you are interested, I know someone will end up asking, is these clock faces are from a digital kit of mine. And this one I have already kind of ready to start as a button. But they came out of my Vintage Clock Faces digital kit. This is in my Etsy shop, and it has 5 different designs, meaning 5 different watch faces or clock faces in 4 different sizes and in 3 different colors. So it has the original, these are the original colors, and then I adjusted the color to make a sheet of all black and white, and then all sepia. So they all have that kind of vintagey look. So they're similar, but there is a little bit difference depending on your project. So I have a sheet in there of just 1 inch. You print these out of 1 inch of all the clock faces. So I just took one and made some buttons out of that. So that is where those came from. Okay, so I'm gonna set this aside and we'll get to creating our artwork. So if you have not been following along and you just need to know what I'm talking about when I say stripy papers, this is my little bin, and this is what I've been working from for all these projects. My scraps are getting smaller. But we originally made in the first two videos, I think, gel prints. And then we took the gel prints, we trimmed off the white edges that are around, you know, if you're printing on an 8x10 gel plate and you're using 9x12 paper, you have white edges all the way around. We tear those off, and then I collaged them together and created two different weights of paper. These are a mix of rice paper and copy paper. And these are just attached to each other so they stay thin for some of the projects. And then some I have put on mixed media, collaged them onto mixed media paper so they're heavier, and those were used for other projects. So when I refer to stripy papers, this is from the gel prints, and you can see the scale of the patterns are larger, but they all have stitching and pen work and doodling and all that kind of thing on these. So I'm referring to that because we're going to also be doing that. But when we made these papers, if you remember, when we created these sheets by collaging them onto, you know, something else, you ended up, because we were using strips with all these uneven edges, and then I trimmed those off, and I said, I'm saving these because I'm going to be using them for another project. That's the project we're going to be doing today. So I'm going to show you the mess that I have. So this is my bin of the cut off edges from gluing those stripy papers together and then trimming them even. Okay, so I saved all of these. So most of these are thin because they were done when we were making the thin stripy papers, and that's the one I use the most. But then these are heavier because these were glued down to a piece of mixed media paper. And I'm using both. I'm going to show you, I did a sample of each so you can see that you can use either one. So this first batch of buttons that I've already made, I wish I would have scanned this so I would have had the paper because I love how they turned out, but I didn't. So I had a piece of, I don't know if it was it's probably mixed media paper by the weight of it. I had a piece of mixed media paper that I had done something on. Inks, I don't know. I had made some kind of grungy paper with it. And you can see that this little weird green color in between, you see a lot of it. That was what the substrate was. It was this paper, and I didn't like it, and so I was going to cover it up. And I turned out loving it. So don't throw away the things that you don't like, because you'll end up using them for something else and you're going to love it then. So that's what I started with. So I wanted to do something similar to show you. So I took a piece of one of my grungy papers that I wasn't wild about. Some of my grungy papers, and there's videos on how I make these. I'll try to find it and link it down below as well. Some of them end up being too brittle to like fold and make a folio for a journal. So they need to be a substrate for something that I'm going to decoupage on. So I don't throw those away either, because if it's going to be something I use for collage and getting glued down, I don't mind that it's brittle. In this case, this one wasn't really brittle. I just didn't really like the paper. So I used it, and you can see there's like coffee and different spices and things that I used to kind of get different grungy effects. So that's what you're seeing in between. And then here's a strip. This is a strip, and you can see all the uneven it was my different edges. So when I glued them down, I just glued this one as the straight edge on top, and then this one, the straight edge, is on the bottom. So they were kind of trying to puzzle piece together. So when I take my strips, I kind of look for ones that might fit in to each other, leaving me not too much in between. And then if you have to trim that, you know, trim some off, you can do that. So I just glued those strips, leaving some gaps in between for my doodling. And then the next step that I did on this one was you can still see some of the white, you know, paper is kind of white. When it's on the rice paper, it shows translucent through, so you see the color that's behind. But if you've laid two pieces of those on top of each other, it's more opaque. And you know me, I don't really like white too much. So I just took some watercolor, and now this had been glued down using Liquitex matte medium, this one. So the thinner one the thinner papers that aren't already on a substrate. Those you can use the fluid medium, works fine because it's thinner. But for the other one that I had, the thicker strips that were already on a piece of cardstock or mixed media paper, whatever it was. These I glued down to a piece of just white cardstock. And it was me just seeing if maybe I might want some buttons that had a lot of white in them. I thought maybe I could just doodle all in black and white and I would like that, but I wasn't loving it. So I had started, you can see I had started doing some doodling in black and white. So I did the same thing. I took the some watercolor, and some of them are metallic watercolors and they have mica in them. And I just did kind of a wash in between. So it's a mix of different colors. I didn't really, no rhyme or reason really. I just wanted to kind of get rid of the white. So that was me using a grungy paper and then just a white background. Now for this one, if you're going to use the thicker strips that are already on some kind of backing, cardstock or something, you need something heavier to glue them down. So I used the matte gel. So this one is just a little thicker of a medium to use. You can also probably use PVA glue. It might be a little too thin for the heavier paper. Art glitter glue obviously would work, but that might be, that's a little thick to me for decoupaging or collaging really, but maybe Mod Podge or something like that. So anything that you have that will stick down your papers, these were heavier to work with than these. So you just kind of glue accordingly. Then the next step that I did for this one, and I haven't finished it, but I just kind of wanted to get some steps along. You can see this one, all I've done is glued them down and then did my little bits of wash over my papers that were too white. This one, I started out the same way that I had done this one because I liked how it looked, was I took a metallic gold pen and just went around all of those little squares and also outlined all the little different colored painted shapes. That was just a way to kind of start breaking up the page and start some doodling on it. And then start with, any white spaces. And I actually had done these before thinking I might leave this white. I went with my black Posca paint pens, different sizes, and then just started doodling some black and white on that. So I'm going to do a lot more on this, but you can see I'm just kind of going through every cell then and trying to add some sort of interest to it. I've done a little bit here. I haven't done anything here. Done a little bit here. I just kind of go through with different color pens. I really like using metallics. So I'm using paint pens, metallics. I've shown you my bin in the previous videos that I carry around that has all that stuff in it. So I'm just kind of doing the same thing. That's what I had done on this. Now this piece of paper, I did it a long time ago. It wasn't really for this project. It was just one that I did to entertain myself, and I had no idea what I was going to do with it at the end. So it was just one big piece of paper that I had doodled the heck out of, but you can see all the little detail. The more you do, the more interesting your buttons are going to be. I personally like lots of little fine details, and I enjoy doing that. You might not like to do that, but just keep in mind that the more you do, the more interesting your little buttons are going to be because they're small. These are not very big. And so the more pattern you can fit into that little tiny space, the more interesting it is. So this is just, one of the smaller hearts. So the nice thing is when you have these papers, I started out with this as one big sheet, and I'll kind of show you on this one. This is the larger circle punch. The nice thing is you can kind of just, I remove this so I can really see, is you get to just, it's like a frame. So you just get to, look at the part that you want. So I didn't just, randomly start stamping. I went with whatever shape I had and really looked at the composition that it created. And sometimes I would go along a line like this and I wouldn't like anything. So I would maybe then grab a larger punch and maybe it was more interesting then. So after a while, once you've done a row, you can cut that off and now you have a new row to start. And so that's kind of how I approached this. And you can see my first row, I did find circles because these were all, this one you can kind of see a little better maybe, because they were, this paper, the large paper was like this, where they were all strips. It created these in-between stripes. And so I had done some kind of black and gold or black and whatever pattern straight across the entire page. So I could do that here, except for I've kind of interrupted myself. But like here is one whole line that could end up being the same thing all the way through. That was kind of nice because I could do a whole row of buttons that had the same center stripe across. And so that was kind of nice to kind of maybe make a batch that was a little cohesive. So I just kind of, do my doodle, kind of look at these and choose, and I'll save all these pieces. I still have some here I can cut out, but I'll save these because these cut up are even cute frames for like the cards that I had done, that kind of thing, or just adding them to a larger piece of mixed media art that you're doing to use for collage and that kind of thing. So I'm saving these. These are going to end up being something. I have some ideas, so I can see future videos, but that's where you need to start, is creating your paper. You could easily just punch out a gel print, but unless your gel print is really busy, like these get detailed, there's not much going on in your button. So for me, my whole goal was to make each little button look like its own individual piece of artwork. So the next step, once you created your artwork, is you need to have your substrate that's going to make a thickness for your button. And it can be however many layers you want, and it's going to probably depend on your material. I just use recycled things like cracker boxes, cookie boxes, cereal boxes. This is from my shipping tags. So it's thin enough that it's easy to punch. So when you're looking for something, just make it easy on your hands, something that you can punch through. So every material is a little bit different in thickness. So what I try to do is, if I know I'm going to make a set of something, like a set, maybe I want 6 of the same button, then I want to use the same material for all of them so that their thicknesses are the same. If you're making one of a kind, you don't have to worry about that. If you're making a whole bunch and you don't have enough of one material, you can use 3 different materials, but just have your little piles where you have cereal box, cracker box, and the other thing, and take one from each, and then each of your stacks is the same. So that's just me being a perfectionist when I'm trying to make something as a set, because I want them to be pretty consistent in their size. So for my buttons, and you can do any number that you want, for mine, I ended up doing 3 layers of recycled shipping tag material. So 3 layers plus my design. So it's kind of this thickness. It's going to be made thicker by your resin, and you can make it even then as thin or thick as you want. But this just gives you kind of a base to work with, because we're not working with a mold. That would make things much faster. And I'm going to look for some, I don't think it might not be too hard to find a circle in the right size, but to be able to find like the heart shape and exactly the same heart shape, same size is not going to be exact. So I don't mind. They take a little bit more time the way we're going to do them than if I had a mold, but it works, and they're just more handmade and organic. So you're going to cut out all your shapes. Actually, before you cut out your shapes, I recommend maybe scuffing them up first. When we glue them together, we're going to be doing 2 what I'm going to call shiny sides. We're going to call this shiny side and dull side, because this is just like the chipboard side. The shiny to shiny is going to be slippery. I didn't do that on mine, and it works, but it will be easier if you scuff it up. So just use like a piece of 150 grit, or this is 100, not too fine. 220 is not gritty enough, but just something just to give it a tooth. And then when you you'll feel this is not slippery anymore. It will glue together easier for you. So do the whole sheet just quickly before you cut them out, okay? And then you're going to stack them, and I don't have a bunch, but if I have, let me punch a couple, because I have one. And when you're punching them, like I just didn't check, there's going to be some damaged parts or some that have glue on them. You want to kind of avoid those, or put them on the ones with glue you want to avoid. Ones that might be a little damaged, I just put them on the inside of my stack. Okay. So when I stack these, again, I do this mask making ahead of time as just a step. Then you kind of, you get it done faster if you kind of are repetitive about it. So I just take a brush, and for this, you can use any kind of PVA glue, Mod Podge, anything like that. And I just put a little bit in a container. I'm not going to actually do this, but you would just brush it on so you get an even coat. And then I do the 2 shiny sides together. And then the third one, I do the shiny side down. So I end up with my brown on the outsides. The reason I do that is depending on, I mass make these, so I may have a whole bunch and I don't have a clue what I'm going to use for my button. If it were something thin that you would see through maybe to your, whatever your writing is on this, and you don't want to do that. So this just has them ready to go regardless of what you're going to put on top. Okay, so I do that. And then the next step that you want to do is, if you put these together, you can go ahead and put your artwork on the top, which I've done on this one, glue it down the same way. If when you've done these, you did not get them completely glued down, like when I layer the 3 of them before I put my artwork, and even after I put my artwork, I have them all glued down and I really push them down, and then I kind of go around like this, and it's going to end up having glue there, which is fine. But I want to make sure all those layers are really nice and stuck together. If you find one popping up because maybe your material was not perfectly flat, you can use something like a little bulldog clip and just kind of clip that for just a bit till it starts to dry. I don't leave these on too long because they'll make a little indentation, but at least it'll help you if you get something where it's not kind of sticking together well. So once you've done that, if you do find any, maybe it slipped a little and it dried and they weren't all even, then I would take the time to take your emery board and go around just like you're sanding wood and get this even all the way around. Because it'll save you later, if you have any kind of imperfection that might show up later. Okay, so then the next thing that I do with these is I want to do something on this edge. And in my case, I did different things. Just to show you an example. When I did the larger ones, I used my black Posca paint pen, and you've seen me do this in the other videos where I just take that pen and go around the edge just to get rid of my white edges on things. In this case, I don't want to see that these are layers of recycled material. So it just gives you a more finished look if you color this. Now, if you don't want to use paint pens, if you use paint pens or anything, I work with the back towards me because I'm less likely to get anything on the front of my artwork if I do it from the back. You can use another color paint pen, it doesn't have to be black. So just something that goes along with your artwork. For these, I did these in the previous video, the long time ago video. Most of my buttons were in the vintage family looking, kind of thing. And so for those, I used my Distress Oxide Vintage Photo. And I just used that all around the edges. And that's what I used on this one. So it's really not much different than that cardboard color, but it got rid of that look of the layers and just made it have a nice finished look to it. To do those, the circles, you can actually just use your regular dauber and get around the edge nicely. For the hearts, that's a little more difficult because you have this little bit in here. It's like getting into a corner. So I use a little eyeshadow sponge, just these little cheap disposable ones. I keep a pack in my drawer, and so that way you can get around the edge. So for all of this artwork here, I wanted to try something different. And so I used Distress ink in Scorched Timber. So it kind of has that smoky kind of color. So it's not as black as the black paint pen, but it still has a dark thing to it. And you can use walnut stain, any color you might have. I just grabbed one that I thought would look good with all of this. Okay, so that was the next thing, is to do all the edges of your pieces. And then once you're finished with that, let me do this one really quick, and then I can use this one as my example since I have it close to ready to go. I'm just going to go around this whole edge. And get my nice finished look. And then usually when I've done this, I can't help but get something on the back. Now, if you happen to get glue, I can see some on this. Depending on what color you're doing this, it won't, the glue's going to be like a resist. So it won't be even. You'll be able to see that. I don't worry too much about the back. It's the back of the button. I don't have to have it be perfect. Okay, so I don't worry too much about that. But I get this edge nice, and like in this case, it's similar to the color of my clock face, so I can actually get some on the front if I wanted to. So I have that ready to go. Now the next thing that I did, this is not it's important, I think, anytime you're using paper, and it's especially important if you've been doodling with pens that are water soluble. You've had me cover this on every video. I've mentioned this. Before we do anything with our artwork, we want to seal it. When you're using resin with paper, you want to seal it also because the resin is going to absorb into the paper, and if it absorbs unevenly, then it's going to look water stained and not in a good way. For vintage things like this, it's not such a big deal, but if you had something that was really kind of perfect looking and not old looking, you don't want to have what looks like water stains on it. So I have used different things. They actually, even in the material that I used to use, the resin for jewelry, they actually had a paper sealer product. I don't know that that's necessary, and I don't have any here. So I went ahead and I just used my same thing I've been using. I just sprayed it with Camar varnish. You do this outside, but it's just fast to do. And I know there's people out there that can't use sprays. So you can use, for the artwork, we had talked about before using your gel plate and rolling on like some kind of matte medium or something like that, and then pulling your paper with that and getting it sealed that way. So if you're going to do something like that, you want to do it before you've cut all these out. So actually in both cases, it's faster probably to go ahead and seal it first before you've made your buttons. For me, I didn't think of it ahead of time, so I just laid all my buttons in my little spray tray that I use, took it outside, gave it a quick spray. I didn't do the back sides of mine, and I wish I would have. And for the last batch, I actually did go back and spray it because for some reason, this material, this recycled material, is really pretty absorbent. And for whatever reason, a lot of the back of my buttons got bubbles in them, more bubbles than I was having issues with on the front. So they are just look more imperfect. Again, it's the back of my button I'm not too worried about, and I'm fixing them as I go. But I think if you seal the back of it and the front, you're just ready to go. Okay, so front and back, seal these before we do the next step. Okay, so once you have all these, this is not sealed, but we're gonna, let's see, we're gonna pretend it is because I don't care about water stains. And then actually maybe when I do this, you'll see what I mean about working with this unsealed on the back versus having it sealed. So the next thing is to work with the resin, and I like to wear gloves because this is super sticky. So I think it was the machine, the actual little machine, came with a pair of gloves, blue gloves. These are just, your exam gloves you just buy at the pharmacy. These are a little thinner, and I think they actually don't keep out the resin as well, and my hands get sweaty in them. They work fine as far as working with them, but I found that I wanted to change them more frequently. So anytime I have like a break, throw these away, wash your hands, and put on a clean pair. The blue ones I think lasted longer. They're more, I don't know if it's more latexy or what they are, but these work, and these are what I have. So if you have the blue ones, I think they work a little bit better. Okay, so I'm using my craft plastic to protect my table and a place for me to be able to transfer things. And then I have my little cup here and my brush, and this one is almost empty. So for the tray of buttons that you saw, I opened a brand new one of these, and it's almost empty. I probably have enough to do this button, or it would have been maybe enough to do the shanks on the other ones. Probably, maybe, I don't know. I may have to go into this one, but that just gives you an idea of how far your material goes. Okay, so first thing that I want to do is I want to make this waterproof. So in order to do that, I need every little bit of it to be sealed. So I'm again working from the back. I'm going to work on the top until it's close, and then I'll do the back last. So I'm going around just with the thinnest coat. I don't really need to build up a lot of material this direction, but I need it to be sealed so that no water gets in. So every time I do a layer, I'm going to check my edge, and I'm going to keep adding to that just with the thinnest little painted coat on it. The first one you're going to notice will soak in really quickly, and it won't be shiny anymore. So if you see that it takes on that shine, but it's going to absorb into this material real quick. Even though there's glue on here from gluing it, I ended up rubbing the glue all the way around, but it's going to take several coats. So I start around the edge, and that's why you need gloves, because you're going to be touching things. And then I'm going to work on the top. And I usually do like maybe 6 of this size on one of these sheets. And I don't want to squeeze too much. I kind of want to let it just flow out of this bottle because I'm trying to avoid bubbles. And that little pour right there did pretty well. So I start out and you're going to get used to how much you can kind of see. So I'm going to, you can see the little drop that I put in there, and then I'm just going to kind of move it out to the edge. I don't want it to go over the edge because it will spill, and then you get some on the back and all that. You don't want that. So you can kind of see, I think, how it's darker in the circle. That's where it's soaking in because I have not sealed this paper. So the whole thing's going to end up being a little darker like that. You can see the difference now as I've pulled away. This will end up soaking in everywhere. So the whole thing will just end up being a little darker than my original. In something like this, maybe it doesn't matter, but I wanted you to see what it does if you don't seal your paper. So if I had sealed this ahead, it won't darken it up. It will keep my original looking like my original. For my artwork, if you've seen me use the camera varnish before, it gives it a little bit of a shine and it makes the colors pop. So you're getting kind of a bonus. When you do the resin on it, it kind of magnifies everything and really will make it pop also. So it's not a bad thing to go ahead and seal that. Now, if you were to use like a matte seal or something like that, it's going to maybe take on a different effect. I really like the camera varnish because it makes everything a pop. Okay, so I have this all around, and if I missed a little spot or something like that, it's not the end of the world. I'd rather do not enough than too much and have it overflow because we're going to do several layers of this. So I'm going to pick this up and kind of show you. You'll be able to kind of tip it and tilt it. Now see, there's an air bubble right there, if you can see it in that. So there's really kind of an air bubble in this area. So you can kind of see them. Sometimes they're super tiny, and so maybe you don't see them, or it's in an area it's going to be kind of camouflaged by your design, then that's not the end of the world. But you want to try to not have air bubbles. So you want to try to get them out. I need to get so this is when it's good to have a little something to clean things, because what I do is if you have I'm going to wet this with alcohol, and if you have a large bubble, for example, I can sometimes pop it with this, or even using my paintbrush and this, because I'm going to end up like maybe holding it down with my pokey tool and, using that to help me move things around so my button's not sliding around. I can sometimes pick that bubble up and then get rid of it over here. So it's worth it to take the time to do that and not have the bubbles. Okay, so once you have your thing coated, it's not going to cure at all. It could sit here till tomorrow and it won't cure because it needs UV. So I'm going to go and put it in front of me here on my little thing. And let me see if I can pull this forward. This one has 60 seconds, 180, and 300 seconds. So when I push it one time, it's going to give me 60 seconds. And I'm going to do just 60 seconds. I'm going to kind of hide this from my eyes. You don't want to look at this. So normally when I'm working on this, I have it a ways away from me so that I'm not looking at it, or behind me even while I'm working on the next ones. And that way I don't have to worry about looking into this light and hurting my eyes. So you just, kind of be careful and cautious, and this is going to do 60 seconds. And for this thin of a layer, that's probably enough. Now, the one thing that I need to do is I want to rotate it. You can't see this, but I put it in this way. And I want to rotate it 90 degrees because I worked on the edges all the way around. And this machine is open on two sides. So it's being cured from the top, the lights in the top, and it's being cured from the lights on the side. The lights on the side are curing these edges, but it's only getting cured on two sides. So I need to rotate it so that it'll cure the other sides. If you don't do that, when you pick it up, you'll actually feel that that's not cured, and then now you have made a fingerprint on it, and you're going to have to fix that. So if you're using this type of machine, you might have a different one, but yours might not even have light on the sides. And then that's going to be a little harder. You would have to leave it under there longer, maybe in a windowsill in the sunshine. The other thing that I have done is to actually pick this up and just hold it in my machine myself and rotate it like this so that it'll get all the sides. So I can see that was still a little tacky. And so now I have a little gloved fingerprint on there. That's not too bad, but 60 seconds wasn't quite long enough. So when I've been doing these, because I've been doing maybe 6 on a sheet, I've been doing them for 300 seconds at least. And then in my machine, I can maybe fit them this direction and fit 2 side by side. So I kind of just rotate them out. So I guess my advice would be is to try not to, I'm going to actually put this in there for a little bit more while I talk. My advice is to work on enough that you can leave them in there for quite a while. And maybe when they come out, if you haven't done the 300 seconds a couple of times, is to don't touch them in between. Just make sure you know that you had it in there long enough before you go to work on it again. The material is self-leveling, and so it's going to correct any flaws, anything that you do, but it's just, why give yourself more work? So I'm going to see if maybe that's been long enough that I can touch this. So yeah, it didn't take much more and it's fine. So it probably took, 80 seconds or something like that. So now I'm going to do another coat. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to just dip the little bit I have in here and just go around that edge again. So you just have to remember, if you do the edges, you need to rotate your piece in your little curing light. If you're just doing just the top or just the underside, then you don't have to rotate it because it's curing from the lights at the top. And again, if you don't want, these machines are not horribly expensive. I want to say, I don't remember. I'll look. I'll put a link down below, but I don't think it was horribly expensive. Not for how much I'm going to be using it for sure. Okay, so I've done the edges again, and then I'm going to just drop my little dollop on here. Let that kind of pour out. And I see a bubble already, so I'm going to see if I can pop it. If the bubbles are big, a lot of times you can pop it from the top right away. And if you can't, I try to pick it up. So I picked it up onto my brush, and I'm going to clean my brush over here on that paper towel. And then I just use this pokey tool kind of to hold my, sometimes like if it's kind of stuck to my plastic because there's a little bit of residue or something of my resin, then it'll stay in one place, but you can see it starts to kind of move. As I move my brush around, I might move my button around. So I just kind of use this pokey thing to kind of hold it in one spot for myself. The other thing is you kind of learn how much resin to pour at a time. Like I said, you don't want to over pour. But if you under pour, sometimes you get these little tiny bubbles that you can't even see, and they show up as pitting. I call it pitting. And I'm going to see if I can kind of get that to happen. And sometimes that's from not enough resin on your piece. So I'm going to see if I can actually tell that's going to happen because I can see a whole bunch of small little, when I tip it, you see all those small little bubbles? Those are really hard to see and to get rid of. And so those are going to end up what I call pitting. And I'm going to put that in there and turn it on here for a bit. And I'll just fast forward through this part. So that's 2 coats. You can see that pitting, I call it. So it's not the end of the world. Those aren't going to show up like bubbles because they're more like a pit. It's on the top surface as the light was curing it. If those were bubbles, they popped them, but then they just kind of cured so fast that they left little indentations. So those are not bad because when your next layer is going to fill those in. It's when you get an actual bubble that you need to, pop it and then fill it in. So I think I have, let me see if I can find one in these buttons. I think on the back side of something, of one of these large ones, I had a bubble that I popped. Yeah. So these on the back side, these on the back side, I got a couple of large bubbles, and you can see where I scuffed them, flattened them down because I wanted my button to sit flat when I did my layer here. But I can fix these. I can fix these when I go back and do my last layer on the back side. So I just used my little pokey tool here, my little reamer, and this was a large bubble. So when they're large like that and you catch it right away, you don't put another layer on top, you can break that bubble. And then I would go and just fill in the bubble. This one I need to kind of clean out because I just sanded it. But see, you can kind of chip away at the resin. So if you do get a big bubble, you want to fix it right away in the layer you're in. So you're just going to break it, clean it out as best you can, and then you're going to take your brush again. And I would fill in just If you need to sand it down like I had done, you want to sand it flat, but then you're just going to fill in that little bubble. So you might have to do 2 coats, but see where it's scuffed where I sanded? I can just paint over things like that in this layer to correct those. I'm not going to do the whole thing yet. I just want a correction layer. So I'm just going to fill those in better. I'm kind of running out of material. Here's my problem. Okay, so see, those are kind of just patched. So I fill those in, cure it, and then I can do a layer over the whole thing, and you won't even know it was there. Okay, so you can correct things. I've had that happen on the front of something, but this is one that I just had left as an example since I've really gotten them all finished. Okay, so fix your corrections in that layer and then do a clean layer. Okay, so for this one has 2 coats on the front, on the edges and on the front. And I have found for me, I like to do maybe 5 coats of that, and it gets a nice, you'll see it getting more and more finished looking as you go. Once I'm up to about 5 layers, I want to flip it over. And you may have, if you've over poured it all, you may have where you'll see the resin has kind of come to the edge. You have a little flaw kind of thing in it. Take your emery board at that point and actually even in between, if you've noticed that you went over poured and you have a little mess, clean them up as you go if you can, or at least every couple of layers, and it'll save you some work. So you would just go around the edge, any kind of little proud spot that didn't feel right. Maybe on here you had done something like, I don't know if you can see this, but if you can see, it's gone to the back side a little bit, and then you might feel along and you might feel there's like a little bump right there, kind of there somewhere. I feel a little bump. You can just get rid of that. And again, you're going to see where you got rid of it because it's going to look like a little scuff mark. But when you get rid of those as you go back with your paintbrush, and really you don't put a lot of material on it. You just put enough to like make that look wet, and that is going to get rid of that little edge. Okay, so you're going to do this every layer until this is just ends up nice and smooth. You'll get a little buildup and kind of a doming on the top. So I like to do, like I said, about 5 layers, and then I do the back side, and I'll just do 1 layer on the back side if possible, because I want the back to stay pretty flat. So I'm going to go ahead and do one just to clean up and get the back even, because you're going to have little like this kind of part, where you've got little unevenness from it just seeping under and that kind of thing. So you're going to get a clean layer, which sometimes means if you happen to have any drip over, then you're going to mess up the front. So that's why I like to start this back when I have about 5 layers on the front. Otherwise I get really thick. On some of my buttons, this one is really pretty thick layered, which is fine. It's just, that makes your button that much bigger and thicker and more heavy. But you're going to possibly mess the front up when you flip it over to do the back. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. So when you do that, also when you get closer to the end, change your gloves to clean gloves, because if you have any sticky residue on this, if I were to pick this up and I don't want to mess up my front, I'm going to get that sticky residue and I'm going to have to do another final layer. So 5 layers, do the back side, let it cure, then maybe check your edge. Once your edge is good, don't mess with it anymore, because that's going to be when you might get sticky things on and actually transfer it to one side or the other that you don't want it on. So once I've done a layer on the back, check my edge, make sure it's good. It might have to have a little touch up, might do the touch up, lay it down, put my hopefully final coat on the top, and then it's going to look perfect. So when I dry that coat before I put the shank on the back, I want to let this cure really well. So what I have done is either do it more times in the machine until you feel really good about it and it just feels really nice and hard, or go put it in my case, in my studio, I have deep windowsills and the sun is shining on those at the end of my day. So I put everything on that in the sunshine and let it really cure for the rest of that day. And then the next day I'll come back. Then I'm safer about flipping that over and not getting it messed up. The other thing I want to do is I want to use a clean sheet of my plastic. I don't want any residue on there. I don't want any chance of something making making this be not flat and level. Even just the littlest bit might, that little bit right there could throw it off and make it so that my pour ends up overflowing or something. So clean gloves, flip it over, and now you're going to put your shank on. Now this one hasn't had anything done on the back, so let me put a shank on this one since it's pretty good. So you're going to put that there, and then I've went ahead and made some of these ahead, and they're kind of hard to see with my gloves on. Let me get my little jewelry thingy here. I'll hold them with these tweezers, and then maybe you can see. Okay, you can see that it's double on one side and single on the other side. The reason I do that is I was just kind of finding a way that I would be able to have this sit down and stay the right direction that I want and not fall over like that. So by having 2 wraps on the bottom, it gave me more surface for it to sit upright, okay? And that just made it easier to cut too. So really I just took my little, yours can be a round thing, a skewer or whatever. This wire, like I said, is really hard to cut, so I'm not going to cut it. But I'm just using the smallest one, and I'm just wrapping this, and it's slipping because I have gloves on. See, this wire is just too hard, so hopefully the 20 gauge will be better. So once sorry I'm not in. I have this so zoomed in that I have such a small spot to work in. Okay, so I just have that wrap so that it's twice on the bottom and just once on the top. And then I would cut it right here. So I would cut that. I have to cut it and then turn it and cut it again because this is so hard. But anyway, that's, so you just want 2 wraps on one side and 1 wrap on the other side. So I have made a couple of those, and that's when I gave up and said I need smaller wire. So to do this, I don't really need to, unless I needed to clean this up because there's, it bothers me. It's just, this one's not bad. Like I said, it's the back side. I'm not too worried about it. It's safer to just put your dab of resin in the middle. That way you don't have to worry about messing up your front. So I would just put a tiny little dab, and I'm just eyeballing it. That might have even been too much, so I can remove some with my brush or kind of move it around a little bit so that it's not too deep. And I'm just eyeballing these for my clock faces, because I may want them all to aim the same direction. I did look at, line them up so that 12 o'clocks were all lined up so that when I put my shank on, they were all the same. So if you have, some preference about which direction this goes, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and that's not even centered, I can tell. But I'll kind of just eyeball that. Now, if you want to be perfect about it, before you start resining at all, find the center and put a little pencil mark, and then you'll know where to set this. But my eyeball's usually pretty accurate. So I'm just eyeballing and putting it there. And then same thing, now you just need to cure that, and then that shank, it's going to just act like a glue. So I'll put that in there to cure. So that's it. I think I covered everything on how to make these buttons. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments, and that way I might have to do another video if I really forgot something important. But let me zoom out here again and maybe show you some of these, because I think, like I said, I think they're my favorite thing. I'm going to get these gloves off. But I just love how each one of them ended up looking like its own little piece of artwork. And I mean, I could say I could never come up with this composition if I was trying to do this size piece of artwork, lay it all out. But having been a sheet, I still had to kind of do that by where I cut it, where I chose to cut it. So these I did, with the trying to do it kind of, I just eyeballed them, but that's that stripe I was talking about where they all were connected, was one stripe. So I put these all with the stripe in the center, but then on the hearts, I wanted it offset to a side or down on the bottom, that kind of thing. All the larger ones I did off to the side, and I really kind of like that more, I think. Just depends on what you want to use them for. So anyway, I just love them. They all just, you end up with some favorites. I don't know. They're just so cute, these little hearts. I even thought it would be fun just as almost like a coin. When I went to my son and daughter-in-law's wedding, there was a gentleman there that was just handing out these little silver, they weren't like, they were very organic, they were handmade kind of thing, but they would just say like smile or something on them, or they were just, or had a heart or whatever. And he was just passing them out to people. And so it was just, I thought these would be even cute to do some kind of sentiment on the other side, have them be reversible, kind of a coin thing. I don't know what you do with it, but I mean, jewelry is an obvious thing, and that will probably come later. But the buttons, I needed to do that video, and I needed some more buttons. I just think they'll be fun for even just as embellishments. You can even do them with just not as thick as buttons, but just, maybe even just one layer of the substrate instead of 3 layers, so that they're, kind of like chipboard pieces, that you'd put into your mixed media art, that kind of thing, as embellishment, that kind of stuff. Something like that. I've even thought, I actually have ordered these, I thought would be really nice size magnets. I did the magnets that were on the little canvases, but I thought these would actually be great magnets, just these little 1-inch size. So I've ordered some round magnet for the back of those. These could be larger magnets, or like just a little button, with a pin back. I have some pin backs. I could do that. And the pin backs, you can just resin those on too. Your resin is just like a glue. So I actually might do some like that were just like a little pin. But I don't know, there's probably all kinds of things I've thought of, attaching them or making like a hair barrette, something like that. I need to get some of that, the other materials that I would need. But I'm just thinking of all those kind of accessories that you could do with these little original art pieces. So I need to cure it a little bit longer, but you can see how this is the one that I just did, and it's nice and glued on there. So that's it for me today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, please click on subscribe and the little bell. You'll receive a notification when I do post a new video. So I hope that inspired you. Have a great rest of your day, and I go make something. Bye.